So let's discuss the chapter 4, rhetoric of laughter, the techniques used in humor. Does anyone pose any questions about the understanding?
Okay, I'll start. This is a clarification question. How does Aristotle's viewpoint, Primo's viewpoint, Medhurst and Benson's, how do they all differ? And why are Primo and Medhurst's ideas more towards like media, whereas Aristotle's ideas are more towards persuasion?
I feel like Aristotle was more like, he wanted observation. That was the technique of it. Versus where media wasn't really that big of a, like it wasn't even a thing.
Right.
So then you get to Purmew and he's realizing all like the social aspects of rhetoric.
Yeah, I feel like Aristotle was talking about like how persuasion helps on any subject. It works for anything. And then Primo goes more deeply into like how we communicate our creations or how we organize or present our ideas.
And then you get to Medhurst and Benson, and he builds upon both of those. Like they use persuasion and communication. And you see like number 3 on their bullet point, rhetoric as techniques by which non-didactic arts communicate, and that's like the keyword, communicate to audiences. And then 1 is rhetoric as intentional persuasion.
So they're mixing
Both
ideas.
like both.
I mean, yeah, they both emphasize the communication, but like Aristotle emphasizes persuasion a little bit more.
Yeah, I believe Aristotle's 3 methods of persuasion involved into Prumew's and Benson's broader analysis of rhetoricals and humor. So they listed and broken down ethos, logos, and into a broader scale.
Okay, going along with that, I was like just kind of wondering, like, I know Aristotle was more narrow, but like, what's the difference between Primo's definition of rhetoric and Aristotle's definition? Because I know Aristotle puts more like emphasis on persuasion, but is there any other difference?
I feel like that's the main difference, but I also feel like Purmew almost like he builds upon Aristotle's, because he says to communicate those creations and to respond. And it's like you're creating something for what purpose? And it is to persuade in a way.
Yeah.
So he does build upon Aristotle's.
What I kind of like about it is, okay, so in Aristotle's we kind of just get like paragraph list. These are the 3 things that rhetoric is based on. Character and the reputation of the speaker, putting the audience into emotional state, and then proof. Whereas Primo's is more, it's a process. It's more
there's a 5-step process.
Yeah, exactly. It's more stylistically. So you're inventing, you're creating this new idea.
It's not like a direct definition.
Exactly. Yeah. Then you organize it. You make it yours. And then stylistic. I mean, he emphasizes one of his 5 points. Number 3 is stylistic aspect of the message, and I feel like that's like more like creative, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you guys think?
Like he just starts from the beginning all the way to the end, and it's like a process. Yeah, like you said.
You know, I think this kind of goes with even Berger's kind of way that he set it up, because he made it like he started Aristotle, you know, the simplest, like the most like fundamental definition, and then it just keeps on building upon it. And then when you get to Medhurst and Benson, and that's like the point where it's like, oh, you know, we're connecting all these ideas together.
Right.
And so it's like the structure of it, almost like it's going through history, like a
timeline.
Yeah.
And which is why, I mean, like Medhurst and Benson are more like media.
Yeah.
Because
it's modern.
society.
Right.
And then also, why do you think that he like ignores humor? Like in this first section, his opening is like completely about rhetoric. So,
I think like.
Do you feel like I felt like he was setting it up?
Yeah. Because you know what? Honestly, when you look at all like 4 or 3 of these like ideas, humor kind of builds into it. So like okay, for example, Primo, he says build a message that's memorable.
Yeah.
Like you could put humor into that, or like Aristotle's, where it's like putting the audience into an emotional state, happiness, joy, like laughter. That's all like emotion, and I feel like it's just an introduction, really.
Yeah, I believe the process is according to number 9 in business process, talks about how rhetorical gives the effectiveness and pragmatics of human communication, and comedy is just a narrow form of communication that could be applied with all this process.
Yeah, and you see like he's starting to connect it. Like we don't know it, but he's like setting it up a foundation almost for his own ideas, because this like he mainly focuses on other people's ideas. He doesn't really present his own that much, and I feel like that's the whole purpose of this, is to just introduce rhetoric and like what it is, and so you can later set it up and say,
Yeah, but
this is how it connects to humor.
right, and it's interesting because there's so many definitions.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, like 3 different definitions right here that are like similar, but yet
But
so
yet
very
so different, yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of interested to see what he has to say about it. So it's a good introduction in that sense that it gets you interested. Yeah. What do you guys
Do you
think?
have any questions?
Well, my question was, do you think the rhetorics of humor could be systematically broken down?
Can you
Systematically.
like explain like what you mean
Yeah.
by that?
Like listed into process how they're formed and applied.
I feel like, okay, promote kind of does that. I feel like you could apply this 5-process model to humor, or how you come up with your jokes, or how you try to be funny. Like, basically you start out with step 1, you invent something. You're trying to get a message across, and then you arrange it, and then there's like that stylistic aspect of it where are you going to use slapstick, violence, exaggeration, like going back to chapter 3. And then at the end it's like what medium you're using it through, like your voice or handwritten. Or
So you're
paint.
talking about like the organization. You feel like Bridget can set it up that way, like
Yeah.
that's how it
Yeah.
connects back.
I feel like that's a perfect one to Burger because like he sets it up in a way, and like you could just take all of, like Burger's opinion and just put it into these
His
processes.
model,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, how does this apply to chapter 3 opening about philosophers? Do you think it's like a coincidence that he uses Aristotle first, or do you think that there's like a direct connection? Because in both chapter 3 and chapter 4, he starts it off with Aristotle.
Oh, I think like Aristotle is just like he's like
the man.
yeah, he's just like such a
Fundamental.
yeah, exactly. He's like the fundamental philosopher of like everything, whether it's like sciences, literature, like philosophy, and as in humor. I mean, his ideas were like the basis of our like philosophy.
Of
So
what we
it's just
based it
yeah.
on.
yeah, and especially because I like how it's kind of going, like you guys said, how it's kind of like going with time. Like he's like the first major person, so I mean, it's
Yeah,
appropriate to
this
start with
is
that.
all like a history of
Yeah.
rhetoric.
Yeah.
Yes. So no, going like upon that, you can see like even though he doesn't directly mention humor in this opening, you can relate it directly back to chapter 3 and say, oh, you know where this is going now because
Yeah.
he connected it straight away with the same philosophers he was talking about before.
All right. I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, it was just kind of curious. Like, okay, so I get like how we move from like persuasion to like kind of media emphasis.
Yeah.
But okay, my question to you guys is like Aristotle defines rhetoric as it's how people persuade others regardless of subject matter or content. So, and then later in the paragraph it says this focus on persuasion no longer dominates rhetorical studies, which has moved from a concern with argumentation, debate, etc., etc. So it's like, I mean, I get why like time kind of changed it from persuasion to like media-ish, but like